This is CTO Insights, a podcast on engineering leadership. I'm Katerina, your host, and I will be bringing you insights from senior engineering leaders and experts on creating a culture of high performance. Today, I talked with Drew Falkman, principal at Moose the Needle, a product consulting company, former CTO and advisor of various startups, product consultant, and a LinkedIn instructor with a course for CTOs that's watched by over 250,000 engineering leaders worldwide. We discuss what makes a good CTO and how, counterintuitively, being a CTO is a people job. We touch on the recent trend of combining CTO and CPO into a single role and why having a deep product knowledge is important for a successful CTO. We also talk about team performance and the importance of getting into the flow state for engineers to ensure high output. According to Drew, it's the CTO's job to be a guardian and empower the state of flow across the engineering team. This episode is brought to you by Adiva, a global talent network that I founded back in 2014 that connects the world's best companies with the world's best tech talent. At Adiva, we provide access to a global network of top-tier tech and product talent ready to hit the ground running. With the ability to introduce a candidate within 24 hours and an exceptional 98% success rate on trial engagements, Adiva offers the flexibility for companies to scale their teams up or down as needed. If you're looking to expand your team, drive momentum in your projects, or need to backfill a role, Adiva might just be the solution you need. Visit adivait.com to get started. Drew, welcome. Thank you for accepting my invite to join me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Katerina. I'm super excited.
I'm excited to hear all about your insights into what makes a successful CTO. I want to start from being a CTO as a people job, and it's kind of counterintuitive given the title Chief Technology Officer itself. So a lot of people, when thinking about hiring a CTO, especially in the early stages of the company, they're looking for kind of a tech wizard or someone that can solve technical problems or make a scalable technology and all of that. But then, especially at the scaling times, this becomes a challenge because you need to start to work with people, you need to start delegating or planning and everything. What's the dynamic that you've seen in companies, especially as they start scaling, and how can someone embrace this people aspect of the job?
Yeah. I mean, CTO is probably one of the most challenging positions in the organization because of that, because you have to understand and manage the technology, and you have to have a full handle on that so that you're, architecting things correctly, so you don't have tech debt later, so that you're using the latest technology and incorporating AI and making sure that all of that is in place, which alone is a huge job. And then on top of that, you're also leading the team, and a lot of times leading the product team as well. And sometimes even like UX comes under that umbrella. So you have a lot of different people, right? And when you get into this day and age where companies are product led, or product is a huge part of the organization, you have to also interact cross functionally with marketing, with sales, with support, with everyone in the whole organization to make sure that you're building the right thing in the right way and everyone knows what you're doing and coordinating launches. It is a challenging job, and I think that course I came up with, I started out a long time ago. I'm not going to say when, but in Web 1, and I had a web agency, and we ended up building our own tech, and I was the coder. So I became de facto the CTO, right? Which happens at so many startups. Like whoever's writing the code just becomes the CTO, right? Yeah. And now all of a sudden you have to figure out hiring, you have to do this, and you have to ship product, and you have to, coordinate with the teams and get your scrums going and like all that stuff. And sometimes you're still writing code, right? And so I started out in the early days consulting after that company, consulting with different companies, because what I found is a lot of startups, they're not focusing on strategy. They end up, because the CTO, when it's that situation where it's the engineer, you're just so worried about getting the next thing out and getting rid of the bugs, and you're just too tactical, right? You don't have time to get out of that sort of cycle, right? And oftentimes these young coders that are in these startups, they don't have that experience to know how to get strategic and how to divide strategy and tactical, and so that's kind of how my consulting came about. And that's how this course came about, because I saw so many CTOs were struggling. I mean, if you look at my course, it talks almost nothing about technology. It's all about managing people, and it's about coordinating and collaborating, and because those are skills that a lot of engineers don't have. And great engineers that rise to the top and end up in those positions, they usually have some sort of natural leadership ability a little bit, but not even always, right? And so these are skills that we have to learn. And look, everyone has to learn them, but I think it's more common when you get into the CEO and CMO and CRO and those other CXO roles, that these people have MBAs or they have experience in this kind of in this world. Or they a lot of times are delegating and not doing the tactical work as they're working their way up. Whereas in the CTO role, you end up doing that tactical stuff.
So what's the, like, imagine, and you've walked that path yourself. So starting as a technical person, becoming a CTO in a smaller company, and then growing from there to a scaling startup where you need to start delegating, or you need to start working on strategy. You need to do less hands-on work. How can someone scale with the company?
Yeah, I think there's two pieces that have to be learned, or that I've seen in people who end up sort of moving up in CTO as a company scales. But not everyone can do that, right? There are people that focus on, I'm a CTO and I focus on early product until we find product market fit. And then once we start grow in the growth stage, then that's not really my vibe, right? And that's fine if you want to be there, that, companies are okay with that. But the people that end up moving upstream like that have a few things in common, right? One is they know how to manage up, right? They're not afraid to ask. They're not afraid to push back to the CEO and to the board, because there are times when the CEO is like, we need to ship this, we need to ship this. And a lot of times it's the CTO's responsibility to push back and say, look, these are the issues we need to sort out. And also this, I'm not going to get down in the weeds and get tactical. I'm going to stay up here because that's where you need me, right? And they end up saying, but these are the resources we need, right? If you want to ship this faster, we need to have, another QA person. We need to improve our CI/CD pipeline or whatever it is, right? You have to be able to manage up. So that's a key piece. The other piece is being comfortable with uncertainty, right? And this is really hard. You have to float, and this a lot of times, and we'll talk more about how the CTO and product relate. But once you start getting into product, and even in any good agile environment, right, you have a lot of uncertainty, right? You know what you're working on, and hopefully you know what you're going to be working on next, right? So you know now and next, right? But then beyond that, you don't really know, right? But you shouldn't know, because you should be learning from all the things you're working on and shipping it. And likewise, even with the Scrum process and the dev engineering process, you should be constantly refining that and working on it. So you have to be okay with that. And this idea that we call of continuous improvement, where you're constantly like improving what you do, doing retrospectives and stuff and improving it and being there. And then the last piece is, again, back to the people thing, is knowing how to create a culture, right? And it's hard, and I've been on both sides where I've had teams that for some reason I just can't get the right culture. I can't get this great flow going. And when you have this amazing culture, it's a beautiful thing, right? And people that can create that inherently or learn how to do it over time, they can create environments where, and look, culture, I'm not talking about like paid time off, and look, work-life balance is totally important. I'm for that. And the whole thing that came out today with Eric Schmidt of Google, that they didn't get to OpenAI because they have too much work-life balance, is total BS. But if we want to talk about that later, we can. But work-life balance is part of it. But part of it is like the culture. I think people sometimes forget culture isn't like the posters and how we talk about things and how we relate to each other. The culture is the work, right? We're all here to do the work. And presumably we love what we do, or we're aspiring to do something and we're working our way up to that, right? And so everyone has a reason to be there. And when everyone wins, when the product wins, when we get more revenue, when retention is up, when all those things happen, it's exciting, it's fun, it's electric, right? And when everyone's working to that end, the implicit sort of incentive to be there and to do the work and to work hard and to think about it and coordinate, that's what culture is, right? Culture is the work. And you can't forget about that. So leaders that can do that, those three things I think are the key. Those are people that you can scale a company. If you've got those three things, you can totally manage. It's just different problems and different people that you're collaborating with as you sort of go up the scale, and more people sort of fill in under you.
I love what you said about we know what we do now and what we do next, but we don't know beyond that, and we shouldn't. That's the part that I really liked. And talking about culture now, how do you create a culture, or how do you hire the right people who are comfortable not knowing what comes after next? And, especially as a CTO and someone who needs to create the right technology that enable technology that would scale over time depending on future needs. So that balance between planning for kind of future performance of the team or future productivity, if you could call it that, and then being comfortable with the unknown and experimenting and everything as a job of a CTO.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's challenges at like every level of that, right? On the technology level, it's like, do we just ship it and get the thing out there as quickly as possible, like move fast and break things? And sometimes there's absolutely a time for that, especially in early startups. You get it out there, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes when your team's getting larger, you can acquire tech debt really quickly, right? And all of a sudden you can get to a point where all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, we move fast and we broke stuff. And now we need like 6 months to fix this and to get things ready before we can even add anything new. Cause we've got some like spaghetti code and bloatware and we're just like, I mean, you've worked in these, I'm sure, in code bases like this. So that's a tough balance, right? And then the product team, a huge piece of this is having the right product managers and the right product team, because they're ultimately the ones that are setting the roadmap. They're ultimately the ones that are, they should be gatekeeping between support and sales and what comes through to engineering, right? That stuff should not pass through. And ELT, like executive leadership, right? I see a lot of product teams where, the CEO says we have to have this feature and it almost passes right through, and the product managers don't even understand what it is. And then the engineers are stuck trying to figure out what exactly it is they're building it and why, right? So having a good product team is absolutely critical to being set up for success. And they should be comfortable with uncertainty, right? There are some people that aren't, and that's okay. There is a place for those people in every organization. There are people, we need those people that can like put the scaffolding into things and keep things organized, and like that mentality is great. But they shouldn't be spearheading the vision, because these like pre-constructed Gantt style roadmaps and with dates in them before you've even like pointed out any of the stories, and like that kind of stuff is, whenever I come into an organization as a consultant and see that, I'm always like, this is going to be tough. So that's key. And then also on the engineering side, I think just in general, how the whole engineering team is working together and coordinating is super important, and collaborating. Like that collaboration piece is so key. Everyone needs to be talking, and everyone needs to be open to criticism isn't the right word, to just open dialogue. Like, hey, this isn't working, or that thing you did, let's not do that anymore, because that really, that really busted me up. So I think that kind of communication and collaboration is absolutely key, because you're going to have bumps, and there's innate conflicts in a growing business always, and there should be, actually. I think those are healthy. Those friction points are where kind of some of the magic happens if you manage them correctly.
Talking about product, what happens? So right now, most of the companies, they have chief technology officer and then chief product officer, not always from the early stages, but then once the company matures, we see a split between tech and product. And I've seen a movement of combining those two into a single role, because now the product is the technology in modern companies. We don't use technology to drive business. We sell technology. Technology is the product of the company, and it makes sense. Everything you just explained kind of leads us to the CTO being involved into the whole planning and product. What are like common team structures right now that you've seen through your consulting work? How is the split currently, like commonly happening between CTO and CPO, and then the collaboration between the two? And what would be the ideal case? What is your opinion on combining the two into a single role?
Yeah, I think this is a huge question for a lot of organizations. And I think organizations have tried, I've seen many different organizations trying many different configurations. And in the early days, so look, product management in the like relative perspective is a fairly new practice, right? I mean, we're talking like it really became formalized and like a thing probably in the mid aughts, right? And not before. That there were aspects of it, but it became like a role and a thing. And really like Google and Amazon and Facebook started sort of implementing these things and using this, and it became more standard in the industry, which is good. I think it's a good place to be. And how you structure that's a whole different story. But in terms of like, look, technology and product is one of those friction points that I talked about in an organization, right? Product managers want to get more stuff done, more stuff done, more stuff done to move the needle on all the KPIs that they have, right? Engineers want to get everything done right, and they do not want to be rushed, right? So there's always going to be a friction point. And that's a good friction point. So this is where organizations have to be careful, right? And also I think one of the things people don't talk about is like, we should do this structurally. This is the strategy. This is our organizational structure we should have. You have to take into consideration personalities. And I think sometimes you have the right person that can be CTO and also, manage product and have, VP of product and VP of engineering, and they can manage that. But you have to understand product, right? You have to, in order to do that, right? So whether you come from engineering or product or whatever, you can do that, but you have to have the right mentality. If you don't, then I think it's really important that product and the CTO are at the same level. Because if you have the CTO with the VP of product under them, ultimately, that because it's that friction point, now it's not fair, right? If you have that engineering based guy, now he's going to start telling product what to do, right? Or sometimes what happens is because they don't understand product, they get pressure from executive leadership team. We have to ship this product. We have to do this. And so they start applying that and forcing the product team to do things that they know aren't right. Right. And this happens all the time. Right. So sometimes having someone at the same level is really healthy if the CTO isn't, well versed in running product. If they are, then you can do that. But I think it's healthy to have them at the same level as a general consideration. But it does depend on the person.
So you would rather have two people who are kind of experts in tech and product at the same level, as opposed to a single person who does both?
Well, again, and this is where, and I didn't articulate it well. This is where like personality really matters. I don't think there's a right or wrong way. I think a CTO that understands the inherent friction point, understands and trusts what product needs, and understand and trust what engineering needs. And they don't have to know everything about it. They don't have to have done either role. They could have done one or the other. That's okay. But they have to understand that that is going to be an issue, and they have to have someone at the head of each and let them battle it out, and they can mediate, right? And if that's done correctly, I think that can be very healthy. Having a CTO with a VP product and a VP engineering, that can be done. I think that's a fine way.
Got it. Yeah, it makes sense. And a lot of times, like if someone takes on the role of chief product and technology officer, but doesn't have enough experience in like product, for example, it's more leaning towards tech, then it might be engineering. It might be again a bad for the company because you again have a person who has a title but is more focused on the engineering side and product.
Yep, yep. And it happens with the product side too, right? If you get someone
Yeah.
who's the CPTO and they come from a product management background, and maybe they were an engineer 15 years ago, that's how they got into product. So they kind of get it. Um, they still, because it's that friction point, they still
Mhm.
are putting their hand on the scale, right? In a friction
Yeah.
point, and they might push engineering team to maybe go a little faster than they should be, right? And might be introducing some more tech debt and bugs and have problems down the road.
I want to go back to that CTO is a people job and talk a bit about everything that's connected to all of the managers within the company. You talk about it in your course, like you need to use technology to better the company and
Mm-hmm.
work with other managers, work with the rest of the team, communicate and find ways to help them use technology to solve any challenges that they might be facing. How do they do this effectively? How do you balance between following technology developments, keeping up with everything, managing the team, and then also supporting all aspects of the company to use technology to become better?
Yeah, and again, like you said, it's a people job. Like when you become CTO, you have to recognize that you can just close that IDE and forget about it. Like you're not going to be doing dev work, and you shouldn't be, right? You're a lot of what you're doing, and a lot of engineers aren't going to like hearing this, is meeting with people. You're in a lot of meetings, right? And you have to be, and you also have to be smart about it, and you have to know when you just have a question that can be answered on Slack or emails or whatever, and when you need to get together and work something out and collaborate on something. But I always think it's important to, and to go back to my IDE statement, um, you should be doing some R&D, right? Or at least, working with your team. And there should be cycles spent on checking things out, like ChatGPT ships a new version. You should check that out. You should know if that's something you need to integrate, or if that's something that can provide advantage in your product or in your company internally. So you have to be up on that. You have to spend time doing that and going to conferences and researching and playing around with new tech. But ultimately, it's important to be collaborating with all the different departments, right? The companies that do the best, that are, you know, really growing, that find product market fit fast, it's because their technology team is being able to interact with sales. They're interacting with marketing. Marketing knows when things are launched. They're coordinating launches. Sales, they're able to communicate information about their ideal customer profile and what is hitting and missing in that, and that can enlighten the product roadmap and can enlighten how you approach your technology in general and what might be new things you need to add, in terms of like integrating AI and things like that. And support obviously is a wealth of information. I'm often shocked at how often the product and technology team don't have any interaction with support at all. It's cool. I think it was Aha. So Aha is an interesting company that they have product management software, and I'm pretty sure it was them. First of all, they hire product managers. So everyone in every role in that company is a product manager for the most part, or at least it was at some day. Things might have changed. They've scaled quite a bit. But so everyone knew inherently what the problems were, and they knew their customer because they were their customer. And then they had their product managers would have to spend some time on support calls so that they spoke with people directly. Now that can give you a bias because it's obviously not quantified evidence. It's sort of qualitative but not quantitative. But nevertheless, it keeps that tie between support and technology open, right? Because there's things that are going on and tech has no idea that these things are happening until they've been escalated to like the extreme. So that's really important.
I think
So
Zapier has
all
also an interesting approach on this. I think they're kind of
who
shifting all of their engineers to support at some point, and everyone is involved into talking with customers. So
who did you say does that?
it's Zapier,
Oh,
the
Zapier. Yeah,
platform
yeah,
for
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
It's
I
very
think that's a
interesting.
good practice, or it's interesting. I don't know if it's necessary or not, but it does keep everyone should be thinking about their customer and their end user always. Like that should be at the heart of what you do. That's why we're doing it. We're solving those problems. And so in my opinion, there's no one that shouldn't be privy to those conversations. I think it's a good practice.
I guess it outlines the same problem that we're talking about when thinking of CTO as kind of like the technical virtuoso kind of role. Because engineers as well, engineers usually don't like meetings. They don't like talking to external people. They want to focus on that flow that we're going to talk a bit about next. But they like deep work. They like problem solving and everything. And all of this
Yeah.
feels like distracting them from what actually matters. But if you think
Yeah.
about it, it's actually making them, teaching them what matters so that they can focus on it better in the future. And I guess it's a
Yeah.
mindset or a culture or whatever you call it, that a company is focused on the customer first, on the value of the product, and then engineering comes as something that serves that purpose instead of being the purpose on its own.
Yeah. Totally agree. Yeah. I mean, look, the other piece of this is, some engineers aren't customer facing ready. And I mean, no offense, but the neckbeard types and there's a few people with ASD in our world and that's okay. That's great. I mean, it takes all kinds. Um, and it's probably extremely uncomfortable for some of those people to do that. So I've never like implemented that as something that has to be done. But there is value to it, and I don't know how what the best way to do it is, but playing around with some things in that realm and just forcing the engineers to think from that perspective and giving them the time and the opportunity to do that. I don't think that's wasted time at all. I think that's time well spent, just if nothing else, just to keep them in that mindset and not forget like that what they ship, it isn't about, I've been on engineering teams and, back when I was coding and stuff, and it was pretty common to sort of blame the user. Well, if they weren't so stupid, they could use our app. And, and so it's easy to get that kind of attitude, but it's at the same time, if it's a lot of people are doing it's still something you need to address, right?
Right.
Whether you think it's the right or wrong way, it's how they're seeing it, and so it's important to like be cognizant of that.
Talking about flow, how do you, as a CTO, enable that kind of culture? So we talked about meetings, we talked about all of these things that are distracting people from doing work that they love and doing work that actually creates value. And a lot of times it's just poor management. A lot of times
Yeah.
we have meetings with people who are just invited without participating or without having anything to say, really. There are regular meetings that are often not necessary, meetings that could have been an email. And apart from that, like instant communication is also taking a toll sometimes, like pinging
Mhm.
people to solve a certain problem where they were working on something else. So that context switching is a common issue people are developers referring to when talking about things that affect their performance negatively. How does a CTO or someone at a higher level at the organization actually enables a company that, a culture that allows for people to get into that flow state regularly?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think there's a few things to unpack in like setting that environment up, and the flow thing. What you're talking about is it's a really amazing TED Talk if you haven't seen it. It's an old one. It's like old from the old TED days, like when it was early. And I can't pronounce the guy's name. I'm gonna mispronounce it. I think it's Mikhail something. So it's like CTH it starts with or something like that. But we can put the link up for people who are watching this. But it's amazing. And basically what he's saying is there's something that happens when you switch. And I actually saw a talk by John Cleese. I was into screenwriting for a short while, and he came and spoke to our class. I went to UCLA, so we got to see like all these amazing speakers. And John Cleese came, and he talked about fast mind and slow mind. He'd written a book. And when you're sort of in your, like what a lot of us do that aren't engineers, and you're zipping from, you're checking your email and you're doing your calendar and you're, you know, answering like a Slack message and preparing for a meeting and working on doing all the multitasking that we can do, that takes a certain type of a mind, right? And John Cleese called that fast mind. But if you're doing deep work where you need to get down and focus, and this happens when you're writing, when you're doing art, when you're designing, when you're engineering, all these kind of things require this. You can't just switch gears into that mode instantaneously. It takes a while to get into that mode of deep concentration. So in order to do that, you have to have blocks of time where you can focus, right? And engineering teams, if they're constantly being interrupted with a meeting here and a meeting there, even if their calendar doesn't look that bad, because you see they have a meeting at 10 and they don't have a meeting again till 12:30, and then they have another one at 3, and you're like, well, they only have 3 meetings today. It's like, yeah, but they don't have, there was no 4-hour block where they're going to go deep and really get in the zone. And everyone knows, everyone who's listening to this, who's worked as an engineer or a designer or anything in that regard, that's when shit gets done. Sorry, I don't know if I can say that here. But that's when you really get stuff done. And when you're in that mode, sometimes you pop out of it and you're like, wow, you feel like you've just like been down a rabbit hole, and it's amazing. And that's when you come up with like incredible new ideas, and you go deep on stuff, and you build things, and you really can conquer things. You can do those like 3-point stories in half a day because you're just so in the zone, right? And engineers absolutely have to do that. So in order to get them there, they need to have these 4-hour blocks of time, and at least 4 hours, right? Because they're going to get interrupted. And this means like no emails, no Slack messages. So they have to be encouraged, and they have to be allowed to be able to just turn off notifications, pull up their IDE, put on their music, and just go nuts, right? And they have to have that position. So there's a couple things that need to happen in order for them to do that, right? One is the CTO needs to be the guardian, right? They're ultimately the guardian of the executive leadership team, and all cross-functionally. They all want to see reports. They want to see burn down charts. They want to know what's going on all the time in real time. They want to be interacting, and the CTO needs to be the guardian and say, these are the times when we can give you that information. And also, like, these are the asynchronous ways you can get this information. Like, set it up so everything's in Jira, and just create dashboards so that they can look without even contacting you. That saves you the time too. So getting those systems right is key. So that's one piece of it. Then the other piece of it is how you structure the meetings and how you structure who gets called into what meeting when. And it's really important. I used to have guidelines of like, this is what, when I was CEO, this is what you need if you're going to call a meeting. You need to, everyone on the list, you need to know why they're there and what they're getting out of that meeting, right? And then you need to be prepared going into the meeting. And you need to schedule the meeting for the least amount of time to accomplish that and stay on task, right? And that's, if you don't do those things, then meetings get out of control. Then everyone wants to have meetings to do that. And anyone who's ever sat in a meeting that they don't need to be in, there is nothing more frustrating when you have a pile of work than sitting in a meeting that you don't have to be in. And you set people up for failure, because then I've been in these cycles where I'm in a bunch of meetings because people think they need me there, right? And then I'm tuned out because I'm actually multitasking, right? So I'm doing other things. I'm writing emails and stuff while I'm in the meeting. So I'm not paying attention. So I'm not learning anything, right? And it's easy. I probably missed tons of stuff. And I certainly missed giving my input on things that would have been relevant, but I don't have time to do that. So you have to be really key about these. And then also setting up the right like Scrum cycle is absolutely critical. Like you need to make sure you have your sprint kickoff where all you're doing is pulling stories into the backlog, right? And then you're setting goals for what you want to do outside of dev work. And that should be a quick meeting. That stories should be ready to go. And everyone should agree on what that definition of ready is. Then you have your daily stand-ups, which have to be short. All you're doing is checking in, what I did, what I'm going to do, what my blockers are. That's it. And then get the hell out of there. If there's anything else, have a meeting after. That's fine. Meet right away if people need different things. But don't make everyone wait while two people are working on their problems and coordinating stuff. Those kind of stand-ups are just a waste of time. And then you have your sprint review where everyone gets to show off what they did that sprint, right? And it doesn't have to be beautiful and visual. It can be like, I worked on this API and this is it. And I've got this set up and that's it. That's fine. But everyone just presents what they do. So you have accountability. And then you have your retrospective where you talk about what worked and what didn't work. And that retro then leads into the sprint kickoff. And those items that you had, those become part of your sprint goals. It's like, let's try and fix these things. You got to have that continuous improvement. If you have those, then the other meetings should be pretty simple and they should be within like the right people only, right? Have like your grooming meetings. Your whole dev team doesn't need to be in a grooming meeting, right? You can have an architect and a product manager there. They just groom the stories. The architect then knows what technical tasks to put under each story, and then they're ready for the next sprint. Your whole dev team doesn't have to waste their time. Let them code, right? They can learn about it in the kickoff, right? And when they pull stories and when everything's documented, right? Because everything is ready as defined. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. And outside of that, like, there's all these different things that we have when you start getting into these like agile, I don't know what you call these big scaled agile frameworks and stuff. And then like EOS, the entrepreneurial operating system and all this stuff where they have these different kind of meetings. And I just say tread lightly in those and just make sure you have the right people in the meetings always, and sometimes have like 1 or 2 days where it's like there's no meeting. You can't even schedule a meeting with engineers on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Those are dev days, right? No meetings. It's a stand up and that's it. Anything else has got to wait, So I guess those are the main things, but there are other things. It's hard because you need to collaborate too at the same time, especially with remote. Because you can't just drop in and do stuff. But that's dropping in on someone's cubicle isn't great either if someone's in the flow.
It requires much bigger discipline because, being in a meeting often feels productive, especially for managers, and getting out of that, sense of achievement when you need to take several extra steps, for example, to get what you need or to set async processes to get what you need so that you can leave your team in the flow. I think these are things that require extra thought process and extra effort, and it's the reason why people default to meetings because that's the easy thing to do.
Totally. And I think a good thing for a CTO to watch out for is look who's scheduling meetings. Like keep an eye on who's scheduling meetings in your org, right? Especially with your engineers. And you'll find there sometimes are people that instead of doing the work, they're just scheduling meetings, and in those meetings, other people are doing their work, right? So just watch out for that. It's a total personality, and they feel. And then there's other people that feel like their job is especially in the project management world. I've seen a lot of project managers, and these organizations that have PMOs and stuff. I think there's a lot of this going on in those. I hate PMOs. They just schedule meetings. That's just their job. They're just pulling everyone out of their crap and scheduling meetings. And When are you going to be done with this? When are you going to be done with that? It's like such a waste of time. Like, have them work on, setting up processes and systems so that everyone can see that. Have them work on Jira, like be working on Jira and putting stuff in there and making dashboards and making it clean and going through and making sure everything's moving across the board and doing little things like that don't require meetings that keep all the information live, right? So look out for those meeting schedulers, those meeting vampires. They're the worst.
A bit of a shift into where should the organization spend time, invest time, or the engineering team and the product team invest their time. There are several areas that you focus on within the course. One of them is buying a ready solution versus building your own. I want to talk a bit about that first before shifting into hiring and potentially delegating elsewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, these are the big questions. I think these are the things that I feel like CTOs end up struggling with in silence, right? Like they get, let's say there's a lot of instances when this can happen, right? One is, let's say you need, more like BI analytics, across the organization. So then you have the choice. So now the CTO needs to figure out, okay, how are we going to do this, right? Should we outsource this? Should we get a SaaS that kind of does this, like a Looker kind of thing, and like get that set up? And do I hire a consultant to do that? Should I hire a data analyst to pull that in? Or do we sort of, build our own thing in-house? Or do we install tools, or they're open source tools? I mean, there's so many choices, right? And then when you get into like the product itself, like, for example, let's say you're working on an app and you want to do some sort of navigational thing in there, so you can have your location directly. Should you use Google Maps API? Should you use a different API? Should you use the location in the thing? And then how are you gonna plug all this in? And it's tough. I mean, there is no easy way to figure these things out. I think the most important thing that CTOs need to do in this, and this is like a whole different shift from thinking about, your team and leadership and culture and all that. This gets into like super analytics, right? You need to first discover all the options that are available to you, and then you need to either add or eliminate options, right, based on what you discover in looking into those. The most important thing is, first of all, setting up like, why are you doing this, right? What is the problem that you're trying to solve, right, in your app or in your organization? Okay, so that's number one. And be super clear about what that is. It's really important, and be aligned. Like if the CEO wants more, data analytics, like, okay, what does that mean to him, right? And define what success is, right? What does that look like? What's this going to look like when it's done? What do you want to see? What's the data you want to see? And really define that out. Once you have that, then you can start looking at, okay, what are the options we have to do to this, right? And then cost benefit analysis, right? So now you have to look at this, and then also thinking in the near term, but also in the long term, right? So like if you're using an API, in the beginning, that's great because only a few users are going to be dialed into it. But what happens when you scale and now you've got 1 million users in your app that are making Google Maps API call? What does that look like? What is the cost benefit analysis then? And how soon is that going to happen, right? So you have to sort of trend some of this stuff out. And look, sometimes what you need now is different from what you need in the future. And that's fine too. Sometimes like the speed of getting that in there is more important than, that scalability, right? So again, this comes back to like really getting alignment. And that's a super important thing about CTOs is like really being clear. And it's not natural because it's hard to communicate. In general, a lot of people don't get alignment on stuff. Like even super high EQ people that are in management positions don't do this. So it's important for CTOs to make sure they know exactly what they're doing and why they're doing it, right? And again, if you're aligned with everyone, and it's going to take meetings, right? But cross-functional meetings, to get that alignment, or Miro board collaboration. Sometimes those are great because they give you sort of a structure, and everyone kind of just slaps notes up and ideas, and then it allows everyone to see what everyone else is thinking, and then you can kind of vote on what the priorities are. Because sometimes you don't think of everything in the moment, and then someone brings something up, you're like, oh yeah, that's exactly, we are going to need that. I forgot about that. So I think those kind of sessions can be super helpful. But getting that alignment and being clear, like, are we doing this? Do we need to be fast with this? Or is this something we're building into the app long term? We can scale it in, and it needs to be able to scale, and we can take our time and do it right. Or should we just get the API? Or are we just trying to break it and test it? Yeah, so it's tough. And then once you've eliminated it down to it, if you get alignment and you're go deep enough on what the requirements really are, you'll find that quickly you can nail it down to, like, there's 3 or 4 solutions, right? And then that quickly comes down to, like, we have an open source solution, we have a SaaS solution, and then maybe there's a build your own kind of a thing, or something that's like a headless kind of a thing that you can do. So and then you just run a cost benefit on those, and see, like, well, this is what it is now, and this is what it'll be when we scale to this many users, and this is what it'll be. And then you can either make that decision out of your budget, or you can escalate and say, hey, look, we can do this, but look, this is what's going to cost, and this is why I think we should use this because of that. And that's another thing, just to add to this, is you can't be afraid as a CTO to ask for more. Like, ask for more, especially if you're going to provide something that is going to increase productivity or increase efficiencies or decrease costs. But it takes a little bit more, a little bit longer. I think a lot of times CTOs try to work within their budget, or they're afraid to sort of ask for more. And they end up doing it some way, and then getting blamed when it's not the right way in a year. And because they didn't go up and vocalize it. Look, if you vocalize it and say, hey, look, this is the right way to do it, but it's $100,000 a year license. Let the CEO say no, right? And then, or the CFO or whoever. And then you're like, okay, well, I told them the right thing. So when time comes, I'm not going to get thrown under the bus for this not working. I told them that was the right solution. Yeah, you have to do that. Managing up is an absolutely key and huge skill. And it's hard because you got to not be afraid to just be out there and maybe take a beating with some CEOs, depending on the CEO.
Yeah, it all comes back to the being a people job.
Yeah, it does. It really does. There's no way around it. It's not for everyone. It's really not. But it's fun. When things are working, it's fun. It's fun, but it's also just a lot of putting out fires. It's a lot of that.
Yeah. Connected to this, I guess a lot of the same principles apply. But when it comes to hiring internally versus working with external partners, like maybe talent partners, outsourcing partners, or development agencies, whatever companies decide to use. I've seen a pattern, especially with scaling startups. They kind of identify culture with hiring internally, and especially when they get funding or they are scaling their initial teams, they want to have people in-house because they believe that they should be aligned to the vision and all of that, which makes total sense. But a lot of times it's slowing down progress instead of speeding it up. So they need a balance. They need to strike the balance. And as a company matures and as the CTO matures, they are more open to working with external partners without focusing too much on doing it in-house. So I guess it's also a skill to be learned, or a process to understand how to evaluate whether you need to hire internally or work with third parties, or I don't know, augment your teams with additional engineers. How do you successfully do that?
I mean, I think just with the software decision, a lot of this is really going deep, taking the time to go deep on what exactly you need. Like, what exactly do you need in that role, right? So if I'm hiring, let's say I'm deciding I need to scale my dev team. So I'm going to go from, like a 5-person team to like a 15-person team because we got our Series A and so now I realize that I need someone to oversee all the teams. So I need like a director level person to do this. So really sit down and think about what the qualifications are for what you need. right? And write those down. And it can help to use ChatGPT or to look at other job descriptions online. It can just help you think about what you might need. ChatGPT is great at writing JDs, by the way, job descriptions. You can just say, like, I need a director of engineering, and this is why, write it, and it will, because it's just plagiarizing everything that's already out there. So
there's a whole new
I found
industry
that, what's
covering
that?
that. There's a whole new industry covering that, like
100%.
AI
100%.
supported job applications and all of that.
Totally. And a lot of it's awful, frankly. I think there's a lot of problems with it because resumes are not the people, and that's a huge problem, right? And things get overlooked, and people tend to weight, ex-Googlers higher than like consultants who have worked in like 17 different things, and really understand the problems and how to fix them. So, there are issues with that. But, in terms of getting that, really understanding what the requirements are for the job, because that's how you can work on this. Because it sets your expectations up. And if you're hiring someone internally, you're going to match them. And, it's great to hire internally. I think that's a great thing. And I think one of the failings, I think, sometimes in tech is that people end up moving up when they go to another company to move up to the next position, right? And so they were ready to make that jump, but internally they didn't recognize that. And sometimes you have to go across, do two different companies for that to happen. So I think it's great to hire externally and give people a chance, but you need to be clear on what they need to do. Like if your person that you're going to move up into that, let's say you're going to move a lead engineer into the director position, and let's say they're going to be managing a budget, right? And they've never managed budgets before. Okay, that could be a problem, And so if you're going to hire internally, that's fine, but make sure that it's conditional on them getting trained in that and managing that, and then support them to do that. So I think those are really important. I think a lot of times that happens internally, like you said, when there's a culture of hiring internally, they just move people up, but then they don't level them up. They just give them more responsibilities and change their role, and then hope they succeed. And some do, and some fail miserably at it. So make sure you set them up for success. And that, again, comes back to thinking ahead what exactly you need. And it also sets the tone. And because the other thing is, if you don't hire internally, and this is part of why the culture can be like that, is people feel bad saying no to someone and not giving them the job, right? And so if you hire someone who's now going to be their boss, that doesn't always go over well either, right? So you need to be clear on, like, look, this is the job description, and this is why you didn't meet that. But we will be happy to help you get to that level because you're aspiring to do that. And we're hoping to grow to need 2 directors and a VP. So let's help you get to that level, and let's make that part of your sort of OKRs that we do, on an employee side of things. Because that communication goes a long way. Because people can, if they apply to a job, then they don't get it, and then they don't like who gets placed above them, or they're not in their favor, or whatever reason. You can definitely lose employees that way. It happens all the time. So managing that is being able to, one is just being logical and open and being like, look, this is what we need. If it's a logical decision, people get that. But if they feel there's some sort of favoritism because it's a Nepo hire, like someone that they know outside, if there's things like that doesn't feel good. So you have to be really cognizant of that. And explain to people and manage it, and don't send emails and stuff. Like, this stuff has to be face to face. Give them the chance to interview, and in the interviews, talk about those things. Be like, okay, here's where you're short, right? This is like, I know you're great at this. I've seen this. I know you can grow into this role, but this is where your CV and your experience isn't matching what we need in this role. So let them offer what they can do. Right? Maybe they've got something you don't even know about that's not on their resume. Maybe they, got an MBA when they were remote working or something. You didn't know it.
Great. Drew, we're kind of getting to the end of the conversation. It's been really interesting and insightful. Anything you want to wrap up with that we maybe didn't mention?
No, I mean, look, overall, I just want to say, I know there's, like you said, like 250,000 people have gone through my course. There's a lot of people that are trying to be better CTOs, and there's a lot of people that are, um, aspiring to that position. And it's a lot of responsibility. It's not for everyone, but I just encourage people to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm active. I'm a LinkedIn instructor, so whatever you think of LinkedIn, like I'm there, and it's out there. And I have stuff, and I do. I don't have time to have tons of mentees and stuff, but I love to help people. I love the work that I do, and I love this kind of stuff. So, I encourage people to reach out to me. And then the other piece is just like a self plug, like I'm now working with this company called Moves the Needle. It's movestheneedle.com. And, I'm a principal there, and we're working at creating. So they've always done like product management coaching and innovation consulting, that type of thing. And we're sort of pivoting to a product studio. So we're working at really accelerating using the way that they sort of did innovation and lean techniques, combining it with AI, and running products smoothly to like accelerate that time to product market fit with a super agile development process. So it's not like you define it and then build it. It's like we're just like, we're going to find product market fit, and we don't even know what it's going to look like. Let's go. Right. And coming in. And so I'm super excited about it. So if anyone has any questions or thoughts on that, I'd love to hear about it.
Thank you, Drew. Once again, it was a real pleasure to have you here and reconnect after a while. Um, Hope everyone enjoys the conversation as much as I did.
Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. Thanks for having me. It was good to see you again. Fun chatting.